Hey everyone, it's Matt, aka Tech Ranger, and today we're going to be taking a look at Skyrim once again, but this time it's going to be pretty smooth. And we're going to do this with the help of one mod in particular, but also maybe a couple performance mods that you might want to throw in there as well to achieve this. And this is essentially going to make Skyrim a 60 frames per second game as opposed to a 30 frames per second game that it was locked at on the Xbox One. And we can push way past that on the Xbox Series X, but we have to install a particular mod first, and there are some caveats. For example, you're going to notice hitching here and there, and that is normally a Skyrim and Fallout 4 type thing. That is something to note, and then also there are some areas where the frames will drop. Keeping all of this in mind, we're going to take a look at multiple scenarios in the game and different areas in the game so you guys can get a pretty good idea of how this game performs with a mod that uncaps the frame rate on Series X. And if you like this sort of thing, and you like this type of video on Skyrim, Fallout 4, just some fun Xbox gaming videos, feel free to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already, because there's going to be a lot more coming. But for right now, let's see how Skyrim performs on the Xbox Series X with the frame rate uncapped.
You've been a good friend to me. That means something.
So when you load up Skyrim on the Xbox Series X, it's not going to automatically default to 60 frames because the game itself was actually capped at 30 frames per second, and that's what it plays as, just doesn't even matter. But there is a mod that you can download and it uncaps the frame rate, and I would even suggest maybe even throwing a few performance mods in there just in case to kind of keep that frame rate up. If you're new to the channel, I actually made a video on 4K displays and displays specifically gaming on the Xbox Series X, and one of those things that I talked about was actually variable refresh rate. Having that on your particular display that you're playing the game on actually keep your game from showing a screen tearing effect where one frame seems out of place when you're turning really fast or there's a lot of fast motion on the screen. So that clip I just used was actually from a video I did a while back on Fallout 4, and there is an actual Uncapped FPS mod on there as well. It is a good one to show what screen tearing is actually, because I did have that mod active, and I saw a lot of screen tearing in the video, especially when I'm editing it. This is something to know when you're downloading a mod like this, and if you're attempting to do so on any of the Xbox One consoles. It probably goes without saying, but you want to have a pretty decent load order to install a mod like this, and you want to make sure you know how to build a load order, or at least have knowledge of where to put things in your load order. So now we know how to uncap the frame rate in Skyrim, so let's jump into some examples. Skyrim has always been a pretty good game at 30 frames per second, but I'd be lying if I didn't like it at 60 frames per second even better, because everything's just so much more smooth. The 30 frames did kind of lend itself more towards the kind of epic scale of the game, as more of like you're playing through a movie, but the 60 frames is super nice, especially when you're fighting a dragon. In this section of the video, we're going to take a look at several of the holds in the game, as well as get into some combat scenarios so you can see how the game runs with this mod active. First up on the list is Whiterun, because I think this would be a really good place to start the look at this Uncapped FPS mod and see if it really does what it says it does. When I first loaded up the game, I didn't close out of my game first, so I saw a lot of screen judder kind of around fire and particle effects. I'll always suggest closing out of your game, doing a hard reset, just to make sure that nothing can go wrong with your particular save, and that you don't see things like this. The load order that I'm using is the previous one that I did a video on that was made for the Xbox One. And when I loaded up a different save, same load order and everything, I noticed something pretty different. I didn't notice any of those stutters whatsoever, so the game ran pretty smooth at 60 frames per second, or at least that I could tell. I don't have a way to actually show each frame, but it is pretty smooth, like Call of Duty smooth, so that was pretty interesting, and I thought I'd put that in this section of the video. Another really good test would be heading to Morthal, and when I popped up there, actually there was a dragon attack going on, so I thought this is perfect because there's a lot of different things going on at once, and you guys can see exactly how the game performs with this uncapped FPS. My eyes saw a couple drop frames here and there just because there was a lot of things going on, but I don't think that's really out of the realm of crazy for Skyrim, because That is just something that had happened in the original game as well, just with the 30 frames per second, because it would dip way lower than that on occasion. I even jumped into this building here, and performance seems to be just about the same, which is pretty good and pretty smooth. So if you're aiming for a really smooth experience when installing this mod, I think it's safe to say that so far it's looking pretty good. Wrapping up this comparison, I thought Solitude and Riften would be two cities that I think we should look at. For example, there's a lot of bigger buildings around in Solitude and a heavier guard presence, I feel like. And the frame rate seems to be pretty steady here as well, even getting up to like the guard area. I thought for sure, like, because of those god rays going down, especially at this time of day, and then also there's some fire around and some heavy particle effects with smoke and things like that. It seems like the performance is pretty okay, and it even actually translates to the Blue Palace as well. I talked to some NPCs here, including the Jarl, and it didn't really seem like any frames would drop, not that I could see anyway. I am running on a monitor that has variable refresh rate, so as I mentioned earlier in the video, that is something that's important to have. But as we move to Riften, you'll see that the performance is about the same, and I think that's really just a testament to the Xbox Series X and being able to keep that frame rate closer to where we want it because of this mod. So we've seen some combat scenarios, and we've seen just kind of walking around, and in Riften, even at the beginning of the video, it seems like this mod is something you should definitely check out, and I haven't really seen any big frame rate drops. Again, your mileage is going to vary. If you have some greenery mods or like things that add a lot of grass, that is something that could potentially drop the frame rate a little bit more. But that could be something that could go right back up as soon as you get out of those particular scenarios. So in conclusion, I'm pretty amazed that I can run Skyrim at 60 frames per second on a console. Granted, I did pay for the premium console, the Xbox Series X, and if you buy that console, just know that you do have to install a mod in order to get the 60 frames per second, because it's not just going to automatically happen for Skyrim or any game that runs at a capped 30 frames per second. And also, at the end of the day, Skyrim is still Skyrim. Any jank or any little bugs here and there or any just weird things that go on in Skyrim are probably still going to happen. So that is something to consider when doing something like this, or even downloading any of the mods on my channel. How those mods work with the main game of Skyrim is what's going to make or break your game, or at least how well your game's going to run with all these mods active. So that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful for you to see a lot of these different scenarios with this mod active. That way you guys can get a pretty good idea of how the game runs with a mod like this. You're going to want to put this low in your load order towards the bottom. So if you have any problems or any comments, concerns, definitely throw those in the comments down below. I will happily answer those, or hopefully get to them as fast as possible. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye now.